Great, so we've got here our coconut cake. Just going to put a bit of buttercream right in the center of the board. Now, if, for example, I will have to travel a long distance with this cake, what I will do, I will just drill dowel. I'll put a dowel through the center and secure it on the board. But as it's not going to travel very far, I will be fine without. Okay, so all I have to do is just to flip the cake upside down. It's going to be easier if I just secure the board first. And then just flip it upside down. And then try to position the cake in the middle of the board. And then again, try to pick the board. If it doesn't come off very easy, what I can do is just to kind of remove this cling film. Okay, then take the board away. And then peel the cling film. It's quite often when the cling film gets so stuck to the cake that if you pull too firmly, you end up ruining the whole thing. I'm going to get a tissue to get my hands wiped off, and then I'm going to remove the ring and then just take away the acetate paper. Now, what I can do with this acetate paper, I can coat with buttercream, give it obviously a good wash, coat with buttercream and put it around the cake, and then just coat the cake with buttercream without stressing too much. But I'm going to just go for the traditional method, just use the spatula. So I will leave the other method for the next time. Going to place the cake on the board. And just because I want to know how many grams of buttercream I'm going to use, I'm going to transfer the cake on the scale. And I've got 1945, so 1945 grams. I can just work out the amount of buttercream, because often we ignore how much buttercream we put around our cake. Sometimes it can go up to even 500 grams. So that's obviously cost we have to take in consideration. I'm going to put a big blob of buttercream and just spread it from the base of the cake to the top. What I really want to avoid is getting my palette to get filled with crumbs. So I want to avoid touching the surface of the cake where I've got crumbs. So I will keep my palette in contact with the cream rather than with the cake. So we'll just get to add as much cream as required to just cover it from the base to the top with a thick layer of buttercream. And the reason why I want a thick layer of buttercream is just when I scrape, I want to make sure that the cake gets covered so that I cannot see through the color of my cake. So it's kind of doing two things in one go, skipping the crumb coating. But if you prefer to put a thin layer first, then put the cake in the fridge and then do a second layer, that's also fine. But yeah, it's just trying to save a little bit of time in here. Okay, so just a little bit more in here. Now, because the cake is quite cold, what's going to happen by the time I will go around and set my thick layer of buttercream, part of my layer, the thin, like a thin coat, it will get stuck to the cake, because the cake, as I said, the cake is cold. So this thick layer will still allow me to scrape the excess nicely, but it will also allow that thin coat to get attached to the cake nicely. Okay, so now I'm going to scrape, just going to put the scraper on the board and just going around, making sure that this scraper stays flat on the board. I really want this to stay like 90 degrees, and I don't want to show off, just keep spinning my either way, the turning table is not suitable for such a thing. But if you really want to practice that and just get a master, you can definitely do so. What you have to make sure is that your scraper stays aligned with your cake, because that means if it's perpendicular onto the board, so you've got it perfectly flat onto the board, 90 degrees, and then you can't really see any light getting through here, that means the side of the cake will turn up straight. If there is any kind of light, just push that scraper towards the cake till you cannot see that little gap. Or if it's a little bit like in here, you are missing a bit of buttercream, just fill that area to make sure that you don't scrape very much. Okay, so just go around, and if you see any gaps, just fill the gaps and then start scraping. Okay, if you want a air bubble free texture, then you should work the cream a little bit on the board. I will show you in a second how, but you should be okay now to go around. Keep your scraper on the board and then just go around and do the first scraping. Now I will have to go around one more time. Again, keeping my scraper on the board, 90 degrees, making sure that I don't see any air bubbles, any air light getting through. And same one more time. And just by going repeatedly, obviously the buttercream will start getting smoother and smoother. But I'm only trying to scrape away a little bit of my buttercream, not very much, because obviously I've put so much effort to put all the buttercream onto the cake. All I want to do is just to get a smooth surface. And I go repeatedly just because my buttercream hasn't been worked on the table to remove the air bubbles, and I just want to make sure that I just do it by running my scraper on the side for as long as it's required. And at this point, I'm quite pleased with the result. Okay, all I have to do now is to kind of push in from the edge of the cake towards the center, just to cover the top of the cake as well. Again, so just push in and push in. I don't have to be so worried about getting a perfect finishing on the edge. I will just do it to complete the cake, but because I'm going to put the drips and I will add the teddy bear, that's just not really so important. So just going to go around and then just complete with buttercream. Make sure all looks nice. And obviously, if you've got a larger palette knife, you can use a larger palette knife. If not, just do with a smaller palette knife, going repeatedly. And now I'm going to go again and just try to remove that excess, which I've got now on the top edge. Okay, because what happens is when you keep your scraper, if you grip your scraper from the low base, you will intend to scrape more for the base rather than from the top. If you keep the scraper in the center, then your control point will kind of be even throughout, and then you will be able to kind of control how much you scrape. If it's like a uniform scraping, and you scrape enough from the base and from the top, so the edge of the cake turns up straight. Okay, good. And now just tidying up the edge again. If you, for example, find that the buttercream starts getting super soft, all you have to do is just place the cake in the fridge. Now, obviously, when you see people doing those things on YouTube, or they don't show you the poses, the fact that they take a pose in between, they put the cake in the fridge, and then it turns up firm, and then redo it. They just keep walking, and I'm not saying it's not possible to do it. As I said, with lots of practice you will be able to do it, but generally it doesn't work so quick. Got a little bit of a gap here, which I'm going to correct, and go around again, grip on the center of the scraper, scraper flat on the board, and I will just go around and complete. Then scrape the excess, go back to the top and just tidy up. As I said, if you're super obsessed with the finishing on the edge, you can place the cake in the fridge or freezer, leave it to firm up, and then put another coat, even a thinner coat, and yeah, keep going till you get your perfect result. For me, this is going to be just fine for an order, as it's not an exhibition cake, it's just a cake which is going to be eaten. So it should look really good, but not perfect. Okay, good. Let's put a bit of a pinch in here now. Okay, and then you will notice as you keep working on the cake, the buttercream will start getting quite firm. It's just because the cake is cold. But in order for me to put the drips, I need to make sure that this cake has at least 0 degrees. -5 degrees on the side, it would be perfect, but at least 0 degrees. So this is going to go in a freezer. And just to show you how you can get your buttercream bubble free. So if you want that super fine finishing where you've got no air bubbles into your buttercream, as you can see, there are still air bubbles in here as we've been beating the buttercream. So loads and loads of air bubbles. All we have to do is just to smooth the buttercream. Okay, as when we do it, we kind of push the air bubbles away and we get less and less air bubbles. Comparing with what I've got here, see, those are just so many of them. The more I do it, the smoother the buttercream it gets, and then obviously the smoother the finishing. So if you look for a smooth finishing on the side, then obviously you have to just make sure that your buttercream doesn't have any air bubbles. And that's the reason why using the other method, we will present that into a different tutorial, using the other method and spreading on an acetate strip, it will just help you get rid of the air bubbles and obviously get a much smoother finishing of your buttercream. But if we're looking here, yeah, we've got loads of air bubbles. If we're looking here, we don't have those air bubbles anymore. Yeah. So it's just the way how the buttercream looks like. If it's filled with air, obviously all those air bubbles will reflect on the finishing of the cake. Now we'll have to wait for the cake to chill, and then we'll come back and put the drips and add the decorations.